I'm your host, named Mohammed Rafi, and here is my YouTube channel, Sumir Universal. Now, what you see with the change, everyone who has been talking about January 20th, when there will be a handover of one outgoing Sleepy Joe, a worst president in the United States of America, between a Donald Trump and another bad actor who comes on the stage after the one. See what now this fellow has done and how he is changing the balance in the whole world. And he is basically anti-Muslims, anti-Islam. And in his first term, if you remember, he banned all the Muslim countries and then he had to swallow his spit back. Because when he got slaps on his face and ass, and he was beaten from every aspects, and I mean he was done this because he had no vision. The man is impulsive, the man is dangerous, much more dangerous than Adolf Hitler. And this is the misfortunate and I think a curse on the American public to have, the leaders in the last, I think 20 to 30 years, they never had actual, a president. They always elected a stooge. And in, the back, the one who was pulling their strings of these puppets has always been an Israeli prime minister or Israelis or the lobby. Now, no matter what you do, it is too late, too late. Now, what can Bird do? You can see for yourself how he has spitted and abandoned Europe, how he doesn't give a damn to NATO. Even previously, if you remember, he never wanted the NATO to be, exist, because he wanted that they've been only, contributing just a scratch, less than 2%, where they were supposed to contribute 5% for the defense, for this, the North Treaty Organization. And then he keeps boasting that we have a big ocean, behind the other countries that no one has ever invaded, but you have invaded. You have financed Al-Qaeda, you have financed ISS, you have listened and you've been a slave of Apex or Friends of Israel. You have passed laws that is anti-Semitism. There is no laws for anti-Christians or anti-Muslims. You spare no opportunity to spit on the face of all the Muslims of the world when you talk about Islamic terrorism. Why the hell you don't talk of Hindu terrorism when they, that Narendra Modi is known as a butcher of Gujarat? You did the same thing, had a war criminal standing by your side, Netanyahu, and you had no compassion for the real human life, human children, human woman, and you don't even give a damn. So you think it is a kingdom and that the Trump family, got Baron Trump coming up, and then you or Eric, then after you, they would take over.
September 10th, 2001, the day before 9/11, the U.S. Army released an intelligence report that said that the Zionists were pros at carrying out terrorist acts that made it appear that it was done by Arabs.
Wake up, Americans. You're about to be pulled into a war with Arabs, with the Muslim world, and you're going to be made to believe that something horrible that happened to you was done by the Muslims. But it wasn't done by the Muslims. It was done by a wild card, the Israeli Mossad, that's cunning and ruthless and can carry out attacks on Americans and make it look like Arabs did it. That's not my conspiracy theory. That's the U.S. Army report.
The day before, published the day before 9/11.
You can call me any name you want to call me. That's a U.S. Army report. They warned us. They were telling us what Israel is capable of doing.
The government, American society had not yet been conquered by the Zionists up to September 11. This country fell to Zionism on September 11, 2001. How did America fall so quickly and become Israeli-occupied territory? because that's what we are. The United States of America is Israeli occupied territory, the entire country. They took over the Congress, they took over the White House, they took over the Pentagon, they took over the CIA, they took over the Defense Intelligence Agency, they took over everything. They took over the American evangelical churches, they took over the news media, they took over cable television, they took over the whole country since 2001. How? How did
USAID was created through executive order in 1961 by President Kennedy, long having lost and strayed from its mission, lost its direction. Even the Clinton administration tried unsuccessfully to reform it. And we spend, I don't know, somewhere between $40 and $50 billion annually on this organization. And with the things that you hear, well, many of us, probably most of us in this room, agree with projecting America's power for the good of all the world around the globe. Quite honestly, if our enemies were asked to design a foreign aid program that would actively undermine the United States of America at maximum cost to the taxpayer, they would be hard-pressed to create a scheme more effective than USAID. That's shocking to say, but I just, it's, look, let's just go to a couple things here. We left Afghanistan, and I'll just characterize it as left in August of 2021. August of 2021. So the Taliban's in charge. Taliban threatens the lives of the NGO personnel distributing USAID. They claim credit for USAID distribution. They interfere with the distribution of USAID aid. They tax the beneficiary of the aid. They tax the delivery service. They steal the food commodities. They divert the funds. They extort citizens for protection for USAID aid. They create sham procurement schemes, and they threaten the lives of those who oppose those schemes. Now, that all occurred before August of 2021, when we were there. When we were there. Now, you know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You could just read the Taliban is classified, and if you don't know, the Taliban's in charge of Afghanistan. They're classified as a specially designated global terrorist organization by OFAC. So post-2021, so this is last year, 2024, we spent $697 million of the taxpayers' dollars in Afghanistan, including $534,719,000 in change from USAID in Afghanistan. I don't know what we think we're going to change in Afghanistan. We lost 22,000, lost or wounded 22,500 Americans in Afghanistan over the course of our term there in the war, spending over $2 trillion. We're just going to keep on spending because somehow we think it's going to get better. And if you're wondering who's in charge of Afghanistan getting the money, and that money I just mentioned, the $697 million is on top of, and is in addition to the weekly to every 10-day shipments in cash of $40 to $80 million. Afghanistan is ruled by folks named Sarajuddin Haqqani. The Haqqani network mean anything to anybody in the room? How about Abdullah bin Laden? Who gets some of that money? Does that name ring a bell to anybody in the room? Because your money, $697 million annually, plus the shipments of cash funds madrasas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS-Khorasan, terrorist training camps. That's what it's funding. If you think that the program under Operation Enduring Sentinel entitled Women's Scholarship Endowment, which receives $60 million annually, or the Young Women Lead, which gets about $5 million annually, is going to women who, by the way, if you read the Inspector General's report, is telling you that the Taliban does not allow women to speak in public. Yet somehow you're believing, and American people are supposed to believe, that this money is going for the betterment of the women in Afghanistan. It is not. You are funding terrorism, and it's coming through USAID. And it's not just Afghanistan. because Pakistan's right next door. USAID spent $840 million in the last 20 years on Pakistan's education-related program. It includes $136 million to build 120 schools, of which there is zero evidence that any of them were built. Why would there be any evidence? The Inspector General can't get in to see them. But you know what? We doubled down and spent $20 million from USAID to create educational television programs for children unable to attend the physical school. Yeah, they can't attend it because it doesn't exist. You paid for it. Somebody else got the money. You are paying for terror.
They do it. Jeffrey Epstein. It's just that simple.
You know, in this country, there's a lot of people who still wonder what role, if any, Saudi Arabia had in 9/11. Now, there's a lot of talk about Saudi Arabia, peace with Saudi Arabia. And then you read in the papers, well, Saudi Arabia says yes, but they have a caveat. There needs to be a Palestinian state. Since when did the Palestinians become so important to the Saudi Arabian?
Well, we got the Abraham Accords because we went around the Palestinians. Because the Palestinians, whether they're Hamas or their competitors, the Palestinian Authority, they both want to see the end of Israel. The only difference is Hamas says, let's use it immediately by terror and military means. And the other guys say, no, let's do it by lawfare, by the ICC. Let's put pressure on Israel to withdraw to these indefensible lines where we're, 9 miles wide. President Trump says Israel's too small. He cuts to the chase, gets right to the point. And which is right. Well, we can't be any smaller. I mean, we're not going to have an organization that is committed to our destruction 9 miles from the sea. All they have to do is cut us in half and we're dead. So yeah, that's something that may have been debated in Israel, but after October 7th, after the massacre, that's gone. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to say, oh, just give them a Palestinian state. They just had one. It's called Gaza under Hamas. That was an effective Palestinian state. What happened with that, you see, was used as a springboard in an attempt to destroy us. When we complete the changeover of the Middle East, when we cut the Iranian axis down to even further than we've already cut it, when we make sure that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, when we destroy Hamas, that will set the stage for an additional agreement with the Saudis and with others. By the way, I believe also in the Muslim world, because it's peace through strength. When we are very strong and we stand together, objections that are raised now as insurmountable sort of change. And that happened in the first term. If you look at what some of our Arab partners were saying, or the conditions they had for the Abraham Accords, it's never going to happen. Now, it did happen because we had such a strong partnership. And I'll tell you, I don't want to get into all these verbal exchanges. They're not important. If we're strong, if we're victorious, peace will come, more peace will come, and it will sweep the day. I have no doubt about that.
Mr. Prime Minister, Donald Trump has come up with this plan for Gaza, which is quite revolutionary. About people having the opportunity to move, about cleaning up the territory, about encouraging, or more than encouraging, Egypt and Jordan to take Gazans and so forth. What do you make of all of it?
I think that President Trump's proposal is the first fresh idea in years, and it has the potential to change everything in Gaza. Otherwise, we can keep coming back to the same thing over and over. Same old, same old, same old. We leave, but Gaza becomes again reoccupied by these terrorists who use it as a base to attack Israel. And he comes forward and he says, let's have a new idea. By the way, I've seen him do this time and again. He cuts to the chase. He asks you these things or says things that people find it jarring initially. And then I said they scratch their heads. They say, you know what? He's got a point here. And sometimes, and I hope this time too, they say, he's right, because it happened many times. So it's happened this time too. And what is Gaza? Gaza is basically a small area right next to, it's 25 miles from Tel Aviv, which Hamas has used as a springboard for continuous attacks, terrorist attacks against Israel. We come in, we slap them, smack them, and we leave, and then we do it again, and we do it, they do it again, we do it again. It doesn't go anywhere. Now, we did something else. We're going to finish Hamas off. And what happens then? Do you leave the people there with all that devastation? Do you say, well, they have to stay in, confined? Because nobody lets them leave. Everybody describes Gaza as the biggest open-air prison in the world. You know why? Because they're not allowed to leave. And therefore, they're just getting more and more densely populated, more miserable, overtaken time and time again by these terrorists. And in comes President Trump and he says, hey, open the gate. Let them leave. And I'll find a place of destination for temporary relocation. How are you going to clean up this devastation site? Devastation caused by the fact that Hamas was fighting from densely populated areas and forced us to take action. They're also devastated by their booby traps that they put there in every house. They detonate. A lot of this is self-inflicted. So, get the population out, allow them to leave, not forcible eviction, not ethnic cleansing, getting people out of what all these countries and all these do-gooders say is an open-air prison. Why are you keeping them in prison? All that President Trump is saying, I want to open the gate and give them an option to relocate temporarily while we rebuild the place physically and while we also rebuild it in terms of de-radicalization. You want to come back? You have to disavow terrorism, but you can't come back. Get get the Arab countries, the Gulf countries, and others to finance the reconstruction. They always say that they care about Gaza. Okay, here's a chance to prove it. I think this is a novel approach and the correct approach. It's got details that have to be sorted out, but two things that President Trump has been blamed for are totally false. He never said he wants American troops to do the job. Guess what? We'll do the job, Hamas attacked us, we'll take care of them. We'll finish them all. And the second thing, he didn't say that American taxpayers' money is going to do the job. He said he'd get independent financing for it, and I'm sure he will. So I think this is a very, very good new approach. And rather than discounting it or, guffawing about it or deriding it, I think we should pursue it because I think it's the right approach. Of course, you have to get the destination. You have to get the destination so they can relocate somewhere. I think that's the real issue that is involved here. But I'll tell you, once you give them the option, they'll leave. You know how I know that? Because I got requests from Gaza before the war for people who wanted to leave. But they were locked because their neighbor, Egypt, wouldn't open the door. That's the truth. And you know something? Some of them would bribe the gatekeepers, not ours, but the gatekeepers in Egypt, they would buy them. So the very rich got out. But those who wanted to leave couldn't leave. Give them an option. Give them an option. And I think that...
There's only one rule in this fucking jungle. When the lion's hungry, he eats.
This Israeli government has killed more children, more journalists, more aid workers, and more medical personnel than any other war in recent memory. In the absence of global accountability, repeated horrors are normalized, taking our region to the brink of an all-out war. That includes those who continue to propagate the idea of Jordan as an alternative homeland. So let me be very, very clear. That will never happen. We will never accept the forced displacement of Palestinians, which is a war crime.
This is how Israel rewrites its history.
The Arabs said there can't be a Jewish state. You have no right to be here.
Wrong. Netanyahu completely distorts Palestinian sentiments. Instead of saying you have no right to a Jewish state, Palestinians are simply expressing you have no right to take our land and deny us self-determination.
We decided to establish a state in 1948, and we said everybody can live here.
Wrong. Netanyahu sanitizes history and completely ignores the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians that took place in 1948's Nakba. Israel was built on the dead bodies of 15,000 Palestinians, 78% of stolen Palestinian land, the removal of 1.9 million people from their homes, and the destruction of 530 villages and cities.
The Arabs were the colonials, the Jews were the natives dispossessed.
Wrong. Historian Bernard Lewis noted that during periods of persecution in medieval Europe, many Jews sought refuge.
Palestine 101. How did this map turn into this? Well, Israel occupied 78% of Palestine in 1948 to establish their settler colonial state, while ethnically cleansing hundreds of Palestinian villages so that a Jewish majority state filled with settlements like Tel Aviv and Beit Shemesh could be built, and filled with settlers from all over the world. As a result, about 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced, many to what became the West Bank and Gaza, the only area still internationally recognized as Palestinian territory. About 80% of Gaza's population is made up of refugees, essentially making it a giant refugee camp. And in the West Bank, about 1 in 3 Palestinians is a refugee. And in 1967, things only got worse. Israel occupied those territories too. For decades, Palestinians in the West Bank have been subjected to a military occupation, and in Gaza, a military blockade. Both areas are completely fenced off, and the people are blocked from accessing the vast majority of their land. Gaza was declared unlivable even before Israel's genocide, which Israel is using to forcibly displace Palestinians yet again. And in the West Bank, Israel is still forcibly displacing Palestinians into smaller and smaller enclaves to make more space for Israeli settlements. What we're seeing today is the continuation of the ethnic cleansing that Israel was founded on.
In Muslim lands.
I regard Netanyahu as having been our greatest disastrous president of the 21st century because he ran American foreign policy for 20 years and he cost us trillions of dollars. And where is the Middle East today? War in Syria, war in Lebanon, war in Palestine, unrest in Iraq, the war in Yemen, chaos in Sudan, chaos in Somalia, chaos in Libya. Great job, Bibi. You did a terrific job.
Stop arming Israel. Stop profiting from genocide. We are filled with horror beyond words. And of course, what's so important for all of us here in the US to understand is that this is being done with US bombs. Those bombs that are massacring family after family in this war of extermination. Because make no mistake, that is the goal, extermination. It is being done with US bombs, with US weapons, burning people alive. We refuse to let our histories, our identities, our traditions be used to torture, to starve, to massacre, to erase Palestinians.
Palestinians had every right to do what they did on October the 7th. Israel has been under the UN Charter as an occupying power and under Geneva since 1967. It has never fulfilled its responsibilities as an occupying power, never intended to fulfill them. In fact, it has dispossessed the Palestinians of their lands, of their orchards, destroyed their homes, killed their children. It is an irresponsible, under the law, occupying power. Therefore, the Palestinians had every right to do what they did on October the 7th. Every time that F-16 flies over Gaza and drops that 250-pound bomb and kills that child, you are guilty, America.
USAID was created through executive order in 1961 by President Kennedy, long having lost and strayed from its mission, lost its direction. Even the Clinton administration tried unsuccessfully to reform it. And we spend, I don't know, somewhere between $40 and $50 billion annually on this organization. And with the things that you hear, well, many of us, probably most of us in this room, agree with projecting America's power for the good of all the world around the globe. Quite honestly, if our enemies were asked to design a foreign aid program that would actively undermine the United States of America at maximum cost to the taxpayer, they would be hard-pressed to create a scheme more effective than USAID. That's shocking to say, but I just, it's, look, let's just go to a couple things here. We left Afghanistan, and I'll just I'll characterize it as left in August of 2021. August of 2021. So the Taliban's in charge. Taliban threatens the lives of the NGO personnel distributing USAID. They claim credit for USAID distribution. They interfere with the distribution of USAID aid. They tax the beneficiary of the aid. They tax the delivery service. They steal the food commodities. They divert the funds. They extort citizens for protection for USAID aid. They create sham procurement schemes, and they threaten the lives of those who oppose those schemes. Now, that all occurred before August of 2021, when we were there. When we were there. Now, you know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You could just read the Taliban is classified, and if you don't know, the Taliban's in charge of Afghanistan. They're classified as a specially designated global terrorist organization by OFAC. So post-2021, so this is last year, 2024, we spent $697 million of the taxpayers' dollars in Afghanistan, including $534,719,000 in change from USAID in Afghanistan. I don't know what we think we're going to change in Afghanistan. We lost 22,000, lost or wounded 22,500 Americans in Afghanistan over the course of our term there in the war, spending over $2 trillion. We're just going to keep on spending because somehow we think it's going to get better. And if you're wondering who's in charge of Afghanistan getting the money, and that money I just mentioned, the $697 million is on top of, and is in addition to the weekly to every 10-day shipments in cash of $40 to $80 million. Afghanistan is ruled by folks named Sarajuddin Haqqani. The Haqqani network mean anything to anybody in the room? How about Abdullah bin Laden? Who gets some of that money? Does that name ring a bell to anybody in the room? Because your money, $697 million annually, plus the shipments of cash funds madrasas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS Khorasan, terrorist training camps. That's what it's funding. If you think that the program under Operation Enduring Sentinel entitled Women's Scholarship Endowment, which receives $60 million annually, or the Young Women Lead, which gets about $5 million annually, is going to women who, by the way, if you read the Inspector General's report, is telling you that the Taliban does not allow women to speak in public. Yet somehow you're believing, and American people are supposed to believe, that this money is going for the betterment of the women in Afghanistan. It is not. You are funding terrorism, and it's coming through USAID. And it's not just Afghanistan, because Pakistan's right next door. USAID spent $840 million in the last 20 years on Pakistan's education-related program. It includes $136 million to build 120 schools, of which there is zero evidence that any of them were built. Why would there be any evidence? The Inspector General can't get in to see them. But you know what? We doubled down and spent $20 million from USAID to create educational television programs for children unable to attend the physical school. Yeah, they can't attend it because it doesn't exist. You paid for it. Somebody else got the money. You are paying for terrorism. This has got to end.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। अस्सलाम वालेकुम। हकीकत टीवी साइंस एंड हेल्थ में खुश आमदीद। इसराइल के साथ इतना बड़ा हाथ हुआ है कि एक तस्वीर सामने आने के बाद उसके पैरों तले ज़मीन निकली है कि हमारे साथ हुआ क्या है। आप ज़रा ये तस्वीर देखें, ये क्या है? ये असल में रूस का रशियन एम्बेसडर है जो इसराइल में। जैसे ही हमास ने इस कैदी को रिहा किया तो इस कैदी को रिहा करने के बाद रूस का एम्बेसडर पहुंचा और उसके बाद उसको जाकर रूस का नया पासपोर्ट दिया। गालिबन हो सकता है उसका पासपोर्ट एक्सपायर हो, बहुत सारी चीज़ें हो, बहुत सारा डाटा हो, लेकिन हैरान कुन तौर पर इसराइल को समझ आई कि हमारे साथ इतना बड़ा गेम हो गया, हमें पता भी नहीं चला। कहानी ये सामने आई जो कि इसराइल के लिए बहुत बड़ा झटका है कि जो इसराइल के कैदी हमास के पास है, जो रशियन है, यानी जो रशियन पासपोर्ट रखते हैं लेकिन इसराइल का भी पासपोर्ट रखते हैं, हमास ने पुतिन के डायरेक्टली कहने पर इनको रिहा किया है। अब ये गेम जरा आप समझे कि हुई क्या है। इसराइल इस बंदे को रिहा नहीं करवाना चाह रहा था। बेसिकली ये है इसराइली और रशियन भी है। इसके बदले में वो दूसरे लोगों को रिहा करवाना चाहता था, लेकिन उसने किया क्या कि उसने एक लिस्ट भेजी और कहा कि आपने इन लोगों को रिहा करना है। अब ये जो शख्स है इसका नाम है अलेक्जेंडर साशा। अब अजीब सिलसिला यहाँ पर यह होता है कि पुतिन के इस बंदे ने जो एम्बेसडर गया इसको पासपोर्ट देने, उसने जाकर कहा कि तुम्हें पता है कि तुम्हारी रिहाई तो अभी शायद हो सकता है महीनों लेट होती, या फिर हम कह नहीं सकते कि तुम जिंदा भी बचते या ना बचते, क्योंकि पुतिन ने तुम्हारे नाम के ऊपर स्पेशली हमास को पैगाम दिया कि मेरे बंदे को पहले रिहा करो, जबकि अमेरिका, फ्रांस और बाकी जगहों से प्रेशर था कि उनको लोगों को रिहा किया जाए। तो ये ज़हन में रखना कि तुम्हारी आज जो रिहाई हुई है वो नेतन्याहू की वजह से नहीं हुई, तुम्हारी रिहाई हुई है पुतिन की वजह से। और पुतिन ने स्पेशली जो ऑर्डर जारी किए हैं वो हमास को हमने डायरेक्ट कहा था कि हमारे बंदे को रिहा करो, तो उसमें हमने नाम दिए, तो तुम्हारा नाम पहले था, लिहाजा ज़हन में रखना तुम्हें हो सकता है कि अगले जो बाकी रह गए हैं कैदी, क्योंकि 3-3 करके आ रहे हैं, तकरीबन अभी भी 64 या उससे ज़्यादा कैदी बाकी है या 80 के करीब है। अभी एग्जैक्ट फिगर नहीं पता किसी को जिंदा कितने।
Or because you will collect the money so much from all the countries by the reciprocal tariff, which is the new terms you have introduced, and you will bully them all and get that money. And then how will you going to make the America great again? Actually, you are going to make the Trump great again. The Trump dynasties, it's like Kennedy's, that the last one, you know that how every one of them died or killed or assassinated by your own relatives, by your own family of Zionists, the Jews, the Israelites, how they coaxed the Kennedy to come up there, all these people who were businessmen, and come in an open car with Jacqueline Kennedy, and so that they have him in Dallas, Texas, and a guy on the top of the floor so that he could have his head bare and shoot him at the back so that he never survived. Oh, he didn't. Then after, some time they killed his younger brother too, so that no Kennedy is left. Now all you have is Kennedy's, the book, and that's what you are going to have Donald Trump. Now the reason I am reporting this thing to you is, and giving some evidence about the dirt and filth and the cruelty of these Jews, is that unless you get rid of these Jews, Hitler was not fooled that he had to do it. And even from the times of memorial, from the prophets, when the 12 tribes walked away and they deceived and cheated and mocked Prophet Moses, they have been doing that since then. How are you going to get out of the DNA and blood? They are liars. They always break their pacts. So ceasefire or no ceasefire, they'll never, ever, ever keep their promise. They will just be doing this thing and cheating you and think the rest of the world is fool. Listen to their own Prime Minister saying what he thinks about the rest of the world and thinks they are the only people who are God's chosen people. Rest are beasts. That includes you, Mr. Trump. That includes you, Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. That includes you, the British, the French, the Germans, the Europeans, the Arabs, everyone. So you should know that who is your friend and who is your enemy.
यूनिवर्सल टेलीविजन को सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें
उसके बाद बेल बटन पे क्लिक करें और अपने कमेंट्स के सेक्शन में अपने कीमती जो ख्यालात का इजहार ज़रूर